is the second largest city in Iraq. Freelance journalist David Axe visited there earlier this fall, while embedded with British troops headquartered in the region. He spoke to us by phone about British efforts to improve security in the city.
Basra has changed significantly in the past couple years. Once it was sort of the sleepy backwater of the Iraq War, and British forces had a pretty good handle on the security situation there. But in recent months, it's heated up somewhat. Security is still a lot better than in a place like Baghdad, but the British are not happy with where it is right now, and there's been a concerted push back into Basra to try to solve some of the problems. Security is bad enough that increasingly British forces are traveling around in warrior armored vehicles, these big tank-like vehicles for transporting troops. The threat from IEDs and small arms fire and snipers and mortar attacks has grown in recent weeks and recent months, and so British forces have taken to these heavier armored vehicles. When I was there, the British had just launched an operation they called Sinbad. Actually, the operation was named by Iraqi forces, and Iraqi forces provided about half the troops for the operation. And the idea was to get back into Basra and to start to solve some of those security problems. The British had decided that one of the linchpins to the lack of security was a corrupt police force. And over time, the police have operated increasingly independently. And since the police never got disbanded like the army and sort of have retained some of these thuggish characters from the Saddam era, they've increasingly taken charge in Basra, and they're operating autonomously by their own rules. So the Brits need to get back in. They decided they needed to get back into Basra, work out some of these problems with the police, and start to win back the consent of the average Baswari. And the reason the police are the key to that is that the typical Basra resident is scared to death of his police force, and he blames the state of the police force on British forces, since British forces should be the highest authority in the land. So the Brits want to get in and start reforming these police forces, but to do so, they have to win back local consent in a given neighborhood. Say they want to go after a particular police station in a particular neighborhood. They can't even go into that neighborhood if the residents of the neighborhood don't approve of their presence. I mean, you'll have barrages of rocks or even mortar attacks or in rare cases an IED attack that it will keep British forces out of a neighborhood. So they've concocted this quite clever plan as part of Operation Sinbad to, neighborhood by neighborhood, win back some consent. And the way they win that consent is by launching smallish reconstruction projects, getting some locals working, improving water and power and health facilities and schools in a particular neighborhood. That wins back the short-term consent. Then they can get in, cure the cops, and with an improved security, first neighborhood by neighborhood and then citywide, they can launch long-term police reform efforts and long-term reconstruction projects.
As part of his look at Operation Sinbad, David Axe visited one of Basra's largest hospitals, where the British have worked on several reconstruction projects. Before touring the facility, he spoke with the hospital's director.
What kind of projects are you working with the British on for this hospital?
Well, really many projects.
Like what?
For about 2 years ago, 9 or 10 projects really. Like infectious ward, surgical ward, outpatient rehabilitation, gynecological ward rehabilitation, sewage system, laboratory, laundries, X-ray department, pharmacy store, many really, about 10 or 12.
Do you know the approximate value of the projects? How many dollars are they worth? How much money?
Well, really, each project has separates its budgets.
Right.
For example, some of them $25,000, some of them $80,000. It's average, depend on the project itself.
How many patients do you see here on an annual basis per year? How many patients?
Per year, no, we calculate it per month.
Okay, per month.
About 10,000 per month as outpatient. And we have some statistics. If you want, I will give you some report about that. And عملياتنا جد بالشهر. About 200 operation
Per month.
per month for many cases, different cases.
How many staff do you have?
Well, 300 and something.
How many are doctors?
Doctor, we have about 50 doctors.
How often do you meet with British forces to coordinate on these projects?
Sorry?
How often do you meet with the captain or with other?
Time?
Yeah, we meet
We have good cooperation for more than 2 years already.
For 2 years you've
Many
been cooperating.
teams come and
Right.
go, many teams come and go. They continuously visit us and really they have good cooperation.
Well, this is one of the problems. I mean, this is only mine here. I'll show you on the other side. This is the sewage problem that we're trying to resolve, and we've now had a project authorised to sort out the sewage problem in this area because it is terrible in the hospital. So hopefully the work will commence. It's either Monday or Tuesday this week, and then it starts. So we shall resolve this, which is a big thing.
The new project is building of big manholes.
The hospital project represents one of the British forces, actually one of their larger reconstruction projects that are part of this effort to win back consent in Basra. There are short-term employment projects like cleaning up streets. There are medium-sized projects like rebuilding schools, and there's the medium-large ones like this hospital. And then at the far end, you have major reconstruction projects like power plants. And a lot of those bigger projects actually are winding down. And so in Basra these days, work on a hospital like this represents some of the one of the biggest projects being undertaken by British forces. And in fact, while British forces are executing a lot of the contracts, the labor is being done by Iraqis, but the money's coming from the U.S. for the most part. I think Operation Sinbad specifically is drawing on a pool of about $80 million in U.S. funds mostly for reconstruction, but I think the money might also be playing a role in the police reform.
This is a grocery store.
Yeah. It's basically storage facilities for the pharmacy, etc. And all this is G9 orientated. All this refurbishment inside the doors.
This is refurbishment, this is a new building.
This is a new building that was done by G9. So anyway, just have a quick look in here.
Okay.
Oh, you're alright. Sorry. We're just having a look, hey?
Hello.
We're just showing some of the work that's happened by,
وين المترجم؟ تعال مصري عراقي مصري هلا مرحبا.
You must talk to us because I can't speak Arabic. But as you can see here, I mean, these are the sort of things that they needed: the air conditioning, setting the room itself to keep the temperature down for the drugs, because a lot of drugs are wasted because they haven't got the right facility for it. And this is something that was done and funded. Okay? Shall we move on? There's little bits of work all the time, you know, that has been critical in this particular part, because this is one of the main hospitals. There's 6 in the city, and this is the main hospital. And you heard Dr. Najim say that, you know, there is 10,000 patients coming through this, and it's unbelievable because it's such a big area, and it's catered for it. Now this is one of the projects that we did as well, to put the osmosis plants in, as you can see over there, into this particular area, and this provides reasonably fresh water for the hospital itself. There's cleaning facilities, but you'll see around when you look, there's still lots of things to do. This is